The small western town of Willow Creek sat quietly between wide grass fields and tall mountains that glowed gold during sunset. Life there moved slowly, with ranchers working from early morning to late evening, horses trotting along dusty roads, and neighbors greeting each other by name. But even in such a peaceful place, there were people who carried more pride than kindness, and others who carried more responsibility than their share. Sheriff Dalton Crowley was one of the wealthiest men in town. His large home sat on the hill like a reminder of his high position. He had fine clothes, expensive boots, and a horse that everyone admired. But what he did not have, at least not often, was patience or softness of heart. Many people respected him because he was the sheriff, but few truly liked him. He enjoyed showing off his power, and sometimes he looked down on the hard-working ranchers who lived simpler lives. Luke Merritt, on the other hand, was a rancher known for his honesty and quiet strength. He lived a modest life, caring for his cattle and maintaining his land with dedication. Luke did not care for fancy things. He believed in fairness, hard work, and speaking up when something felt wrong. Because of this, he sometimes found himself at odds with people who preferred silence over truth, people like the sheriff. One warm evening, the townsfolk gathered in the center of Willow Creek for a small festival. Lanterns hung from poles, music floated through the air, and families enjoyed pies, laughter, and friendly conversation. It was a rare chance for everyone to put aside their daily responsibilities and simply enjoy being together. Luke attended the gathering as well, mostly because his ranch hands insisted he deserved a break. He stood near a wooden table with a cup of lemonade, chatting with familiar faces. Although he kept mostly to himself, he enjoyed listening to others talk about their week, their cattle, their families, their hopes for better seasons. Everything was pleasant until Sheriff Crowley arrived. As always, he made sure his entrance was noticed. His polished boots, shining badge, and confident posture drew eyes immediately. People greeted him, though with careful politeness. The sheriff enjoyed being the center of attention, so he moved from group to group, making comments that sounded friendly but often carried a sharp undertone. Luke watched quietly, not interested in the sheriff's showmanship. But eventually Sheriff Crowley, noticing Luke's calm presence and remembering their past disagreements about taxes and ranching rules, walked his way. "Well, well," the sheriff said with a certain smugness. "If it isn't Luke Merritt, the town's bravest complainer." Luke smiled softly. "I only speak when something doesn't feel right. Nothing more." "Oh, I'm sure of that," the sheriff replied, pretending to laugh but giving off a sense of challenge. Several people nearby turned their attention toward them. Crowds enjoyed entertainment, and the sheriff clearly intended to provide some. "What complaint do you have today?" Crowley asked loudly so others could hear. "Are my taxes too heavy on your proud ranch? Or is it my rules that trouble you again?" Luke did not want to make a scene, but he also did not like being mocked. "I simply think fairness is good for everyone," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Even ranchers who work sunup to sundown deserve that." The sheriff raised his brows. "Fairness, you say? That's a strong word for a man with more opinions than cattle." A few people chuckled softly, though not out of true amusement. They laughed because the sheriff was watching. Luke could have walked away. He could have ignored the comments. But one thing he never allowed was disrespect disguised as humor. "I'm not here to argue," Luke said. "Just enjoying the evening like everyone else." The sheriff, however, seemed disappointed by Luke's calmness. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to show the crowd that no one could stand equal to him, especially not a simple rancher. So, with a smirk, he made a comment that surprised everyone. "Well, if you want more responsibility, Luke," the sheriff said loudly, "how about I give you something else to take care of? Maybe my daughter would keep you busy. I'm sure you wouldn't mind." The crowd went silent. Everyone knew about Clara Crowley, the sheriff's daughter. She had been unable to walk since a childhood accident and used a wheelchair. Many townsfolk felt sympathy for her, but they also knew the sheriff rarely showed her the warmth she deserved. He kept her away from gatherings and treated her more like an afterthought than a treasure. Luke's eyes widened at the sheriff's statement. He could not believe such words had been spoken not because of Clara's condition, but because she deserved dignity, not to be used in a public remark. Some people nervously laughed, unsure how to react. Others stared at the sheriff in disbelief. Clara was not there that night, but if she had been, everyone knew her heart would have hurt deeply. Luke set his cup down slowly. He did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. Instead, he looked the sheriff directly in the eyes. "That isn't something to speak lightly about," Luke said softly. "Your daughter deserves more respect than being part of a joke." The sheriff blinked, perhaps not expecting Luke to defend Clara. But Luke could see the truth. For the sheriff, it truly was a joke. An attempt to humiliate Luke by suggesting he take on a responsibility Crowley viewed as too heavy for himself. The remark reflected more about the sheriff's heart than Clara's worth. The townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. They whispered quietly, surprised by the sheriff's insensitivity. Some admired Luke's gentle response. Others looked at the sheriff with new doubt. A moment that Crowley thought would make him look clever had only revealed the unkindness behind his smile. Luke excused himself from the circle and walked away, needing a moment to breathe fresh air away from the crowd. He felt more sadness than anger, sadness for Clara, who did not deserve to be talked about that way, and sadness for a father who seemed to see his child as a burden instead of a blessing. As he moved toward the quieter edge of the gathering, he passed by the hill where the sheriff's home stood. A soft light glowed from one of the upper windows. Luke wondered if Clara was awake, perhaps watching the lights from the festival even though she could not join. He imagined her sitting quietly, perhaps reading or sewing, finding comfort in small hobbies. Luke had seen her once or twice from a distance. She always carried a gentle expression and a quiet grace. He remembered her soft smile and the way she held herself with dignity, even when she was alone. She never appeared bitter, even though life had not been easy. That night, Luke couldn't shake the image of Clara being spoken about so carelessly. She deserved kindness, encouragement, and respect. She deserved a father who saw her worth fully. She deserved a community that lifted her up instead of whispering behind her back. Luke did not know why he felt so protective in that moment. Perhaps it was because he believed every person deserved to be treated with dignity. Perhaps it was because he admired quiet strength. Or perhaps it was simply because, deep inside, he sensed that Clara had more goodness in her than her father realized. As the festival ended and people headed home, Luke looked up once more at the glowing window. He wondered if Clara felt lonely or forgotten. He wondered if she longed for a life outside the walls of the sheriff's house. And he wondered if, maybe, just maybe, he could someday offer her a place where she felt valued. He did not know that his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. He did not know that this small moment of compassion would lead him down a path filled with unexpected challenges, new beginnings, and the discovery of a strength far deeper than he had ever seen. But for now, he simply walked home under the quiet stars, carrying with him a promise he hadn't yet spoken aloud, a promise that someone like Clara deserved better than being the punchline of a thoughtless remark. She deserved to be seen. And Luke Merritt had seen her. The morning after the festival felt unusually quiet in Willow Creek. A soft mist floated over the fields, and the sun rose slowly, warming the roofs of small wooden houses. But Luke Merritt hardly noticed the beauty of the morning. His mind was still replaying the sheriff's careless remark about Clara, the way the townsfolk fell silent, and the look in the sheriff's eyes, half amusement, half pride, as if using his own daughter in a joke was nothing unusual. Luke had barely slept. Each time he closed his eyes, he imagined Clara alone in the big house, unaware of how she had been spoken about. He wondered how often she faced that kind of thoughtlessness, He wondered if she had grown used to being silent in a home where her voice didn't matter much. After finishing the morning chores, Luke made a decision. He washed his hands, put on a clean shirt, and saddled his horse. He didn't know exactly what he planned to say, but he knew he needed to see Clara. Not to argue with the sheriff, not to prove anything to anyone, just to offer a simple apology and a bit of kindness that she deserved. The road to the sheriff's house curved up the hill. Luke rode slowly, unsure how his visit would be received. The sheriff was not the type to appreciate unexpected guests, and Luke expected he might be turned away. Still, something stronger than fear pushed him forward. When he reached the gate, he dismounted and tied his horse. The house was large and elegant, but it felt strangely empty, like a place where laughter rarely echoed. Luke walked to the door and knocked. A housekeeper opened it, looking surprised to see him. "Good morning," Luke said gently. "I was hoping to speak with Miss Clara, if she's well enough for visitors." The housekeeper hesitated. "Miss Clara doesn't get many visitors," she said quietly. "The sheriff usually prefers that she stays undisturbed." Luke nodded. "I understand, but I promise my intention is kind." The housekeeper studied him, then slowly stepped aside. "Wait here. I'll ask her. I'm law to ground. 2000 B. Locarded. Luminez. 2000. The housekeeper. Locarded by a rounded. The housekeeper. The housekeeper. The housekeeper. The housekeeper." After a moment, the housekeeper returned and motioned for him to enter. Luke followed her down a hallway filled with portraits and expensive decorations that somehow felt cold rather than warm. Finally, they reached a small sitting room. In the corner, near a window filled with soft light, sat Clara Crowley. Her hands rested gently on her lap, and her long hair was neatly braided. Her wheelchair was simple, but well kept. She looked up as Luke stepped inside, and for a moment, surprise flickered in her eyes. Luke removed his hat politely. "Good morning, Miss Clara," he said. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to speak with you." Clara offered a polite smile. "It's all right. Please sit." Her voice was soft but steady, carrying a quiet grace that made Luke feel instantly at ease. He sat in a chair across from her. They were silent for a moment, both unsure how to begin. Finally, Luke spoke. "I'm sure you weren't told, but last night at the festival, your father made a remark. A thoughtless one. And I didn't want you to hear it from someone else, or misunderstand the silence of the crowd." Clara lowered her eyes slightly, as though already knowing what kind of remark it must have been. Luke continued gently, choosing each word with care. "He used your name to make fun of me. He treated you like something to joke about. And I felt it was wrong. So, I wanted to apologize. Not for him, he should apologize himself, but for the hurt that might come from his words." Clara looked up again. Her eyes, a calm shade of blue, held both sadness and understanding. "You didn't have to come all this way for that," she said quietly. "But I appreciate that you did." Luke nodded. "I just didn't want you to wonder or worry. You deserve respect, Miss Clara. And last night, you didn't receive it." Clara sighed softly and turned her gaze toward the window. "People often speak about me without thinking," she said. "Sometimes I hear whispers when others believe I'm not listening. Sometimes I'm spoken about as if I'm not a real person. It hurts, but I've learned to live with it." "I don't think anyone should have to live with that," Luke replied gently. Clara gave him a faint smile. "You're kind, Mr. Merritt." "You can call me Luke," he said. "All right then, Luke." She paused as if tasting the unfamiliar comfort of saying someone's first name. "Thank you." Luke shifted slightly in his chair. "And there's something else. Last night, when your father mentioned you, I couldn't help but think you looked lonely up here in this big house. Do you have many friends who visit?" Clara hesitated before answering. Not really. I used to have friends when I was younger, before my accident, but people don't know how to act around me now. Some feel sorry for me. Others feel uncomfortable because they don't understand my situation. After a while, most stopped visiting. Luke felt a deep ache in his chest. No one deserved such isolation, especially someone like Clara, who seemed so gentle and thoughtful. "Do you enjoy staying indoors all the time?" Luke asked softly. Clara shook her head. "No. I wish I could be outside more. I love the open air, the smell of fresh grass, the sound of horses. But my father thinks it's safer if I stay inside. He worries too much about appearances, and not enough about my happiness." Luke listened with growing respect. Clara wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She simply accepted her life with a kind of quiet strength that most people never learned. After a moment, Clara tilted her head slightly. "May I ask something?" "Of course," Luke said. "What did you think last night when my father said those words? What was your first thought?" Luke gave an honest answer. "I thought you deserved better than being spoken about like that. And I thought your father doesn't see how strong you are." Clara blinked gently. "Strong? Me?" "Yes," Luke said without hesitation. "Anyone can be strong when life is simple. But someone who stays gentle and hopeful, even when life is hard, that's real strength." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked truly touched. No one had said something like that to her before. Luke leaned forward slightly. "Miss Clara, I don't want to overstep, but I'd like to offer something. Not out of pity. Not because of what happened, but because I think you might need it." Clara waited quietly, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "If you ever want to leave this house for a little while," Luke said, "you'd be welcome at my ranch. You could breathe fresh air, see the fields, maybe meet the horses. You could help with things too, if you'd like. There's a lot of work that isn't physical things you'd likely be much better at than I am." Clara's eyebrows lifted slightly. She seemed surprised, but also curious. "You would allow that?" "I'd be honored," Luke said sincerely. Clara looked down at her hands. "I've never been invited to a ranch before. Father always said it would be too difficult or too embarrassing for me." Luke shook his head. "There's nothing embarrassing about you, and difficulty isn't something to run from. It's something to work through, together." Clara's eyes grew bright, though not with tears, more like hope. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "I would like that," she said softly. "Very much." Luke smiled warmly. "Then, whenever you're ready, just send word. I'll come help you get there." Clara nodded, still processing the idea. "I don't know what Father will say," she admitted, "but I think, for the first time, I want to choose something for myself." Luke admired her courage. Even speaking those words was an act of quiet bravery. "You deserve that choice," he said. Their conversation continued for a little while longer. Clara asked questions about the ranch, how many horses Luke had, how many acres the land covered, what chores filled the day. Luke answered patiently, describing the wide pastures, the gentle animals, and the calm beauty of early mornings in open spaces. By the time Luke stood to leave, the room felt lighter, as though Clara's heart had opened a window of its own. "It was good meeting you," Clara said. "You too," Luke said gently. "And remember, you're welcome anytime." As Luke walked out of the house and mounted his horse, he felt a new sense of purpose. Not out of duty, but out of admiration. Clara was kinder, wiser, and stronger than he had imagined. And Clara watched from the window as Luke rode down the hill. For the first time in years, she felt the spark of a possibility. A life with more color, more freedom, more hope. A life where she wasn't treated like a delicate object, but like a person of value. She whispered to herself, almost shyly, "Maybe things can change." And deep inside, she knew that Luke's visit was the beginning of something important. The next week in Willow Creek passed quietly. But inside the sheriff's house, Clara Crowley was feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement, mixed with nervousness. Luke Merritt's visit had left a warm impression on her heart. His kindness was genuine, his words respectful, and his invitation to the ranch felt like a doorway to a life she had only imagined from her bedroom window. For days, Clara thought about the ranch, the open fields Luke described, the horses, the sound of the wind moving through tall grass. She imagined herself outdoors, feeling the fresh air on her face instead of staying inside the house where time often felt slow and lonely. Finally, after much thought, Clara gathered the courage to send word to Luke. She wrote a short, simple note with careful handwriting. "I would like to visit the ranch, if the offer still stands." When the housekeeper delivered the note to Luke the following morning, his heart lifted. He immediately prepared the wagon, making sure it was comfortable and safe for Clara to climb into easily. He even placed soft blankets and cushions so her ride would be smooth. He asked his ranch hands to tidy the yard and prepare a place near the porch where Clara could rest if she needed shade. When Luke arrived at the sheriff's house, the housekeeper greeted him with a small smile. "Miss Clara is ready," she said. "She's been waiting by the window for you." "Where?" Luke stepped inside and found Clara in the sitting room. She wore a light blue dress and had her hair carefully braided. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement she tried not to show too openly. "Good morning, Miss Clara," Luke said with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Luke," she replied. "Thank you for coming." Luke approached her wheelchair. Clara nodded, more than ready. With care and patience, Luke helped her into the wagon, making sure she was comfortable. Clara looked around, enjoying the simple act of being outside. The sunlight warmed her face, and the gentle movement of the wagon wheels made her feel oddly free. As they traveled down the hill and toward the ranch, Clara watched everything with wide, curious eyes. Birds flew overhead, horses grazed in fenced fields, and the scent of wildflowers filled the air. She felt as if she had stepped into a new world, one she had always admired from afar. When they reached Luke's ranch, several ranch hands paused their work to watch. They knew who Clara was, but they had never seen her outside the sheriff's home. They straightened respectfully, offering nods of welcome. "This is beautiful," Clara whispered as Luke helped her down. "I'm glad you think so," Luke said warmly. "You're welcome to explore as much as you want. And if anything feels tiring, you can rest on the porch." Clara smiled. "Thank you. Truly." Luke guided her wheelchair over the smooth paths he had prepared earlier. Clara observed everything, the stables, the cattle, the workers who moved about with friendly expressions. She felt no judgment here. No whispers. No pity. Only curiosity and kindness. Luke introduced her to the horses one by one. Clara laughed softly when a young brown horse nudged its nose against her hand. "He likes you," Luke said. "Does he like everyone?" Clara asked. Luke shook his head. "Not exactly. But he seems to like you." Clara's heart warmed. Animals, she knew, didn't pretend. They didn't care about appearances. They sensed sincerity. As the morning passed, Clara asked many questions. She wanted to know how the ranch worked, what Luke did each day, how long it took to care for all the animals. Luke answered patiently, enjoying her curiosity. Eventually, they reached the porch, where Luke had set up a small table with lemonade and fresh bread. Clara settled into the shade, feeling the breeze brush across her skin. "This is the first time I've felt peaceful in a long while," she admitted softly. "I didn't realize how much I missed being outdoors." Luke pulled up a chair beside her. "I'm happy you're here. Stay as long as you want." I. Clara turned her gaze toward the fields. "Do you always get to see this view?" "Every day," Luke replied. She smiled gently. "You're lucky." "Maybe so," Luke said. "But sometimes, it takes someone else's eyes to remind you how beautiful something truly is." Clara looked at him. grateful for the way he spoke, not to impress her, not to pity her, but simply to share the moment. Later in the afternoon, Luke invited Clara into his small office near the barn. He explained that he usually managed paperwork there, tracking cattle movement, planning feed schedules, checking finances. "It's not the most exciting part of ranch work," he said, "but it needs to be done." Clara leaned forward, studying the papers neatly stacked on the desk. "I could help with this," she said thoughtfully. Luke blinked. "Yes," Clara replied with quiet confidence. "I used to do all the household bookkeeping for my father. I'm familiar with organizing accounts and schedules. If you'd like, I could help you keep these in better order." Luke chuckled softly. "Better order? Are you saying my system isn't good?" Clara smiled. "I'm saying it could be improved." Luke offered her a pencil and a ledger. "Then go ahead. Show me how you'd do it." Clara took the ledger with a sense of purpose. She scanned the numbers carefully, rewriting some columns, adding notes, and reorganizing the information into a clearer format. Her hands moved with graceful precision. Luke watched in admiration. "You're amazing at this." Clara looked up shyly. "I've always liked organizing things. It makes me feel useful." "You are useful," Luke said sincerely. "More than you realize." Clara lowered her gaze, touched by his words. For so long, she had felt like she lived in the background of her own life. But here, in Luke's ranch office, she felt needed. She felt capable. Over the next few hours, Clara helped Luke review several documents. She broke tasks into simple steps, suggested easier methods, and even pointed out small errors Luke had overlooked. He listened closely, grateful for her insights. When they finished, Luke leaned back with a smile. "I can't believe how much we accomplished." Clara felt a warm glow of pride. "I enjoyed it," she said. "More than I expected to." Luke's ranch hands occasionally passed by the office door. They peeked in curiously, seeing their boss working side by side with Clara. They had always respected Luke, but seeing him treat Clara with genuine kindness made them admire him even more. By late afternoon, Clara grew slightly tired, so Luke helped her back to the porch. They sat quietly, watching the sun begin to lower behind the hills. "This place feels alive," Clara said softly. "Not like Father's house. There. Everything is so still." Luke nodded. "Places reflect the people who live in them." Clara thought about that. She knew her father's house felt cold because it was filled with distance and pride. But the ranch felt warm because kindness lived there. "Luke," Clara asked after a moment. Luke smiled warmly. "You're welcome anytime." Clara breathed deeply, feeling more hopeful than she had in years. "I'd like to help with the office work regularly," she said. "If you want me to." "One. I would be honored," Luke replied. As the day came to an end, Luke helped Clara back into the wagon. She felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired, like she had lived a full day instead of just watching one pass by. On the ride home, Clara talked softly about the horses, the fields, and the work she wanted to help with. Luke listened, enjoying her excitement. He felt grateful for her presence, not as a visitor but as someone who brought calm and intelligence to his ranch. When they reached the sheriff's house, the housekeeper came out to help. Before Luke left, Clara looked at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you for today," she said. "It meant more to me than you know." "It meant a lot to me too," Luke replied. "Sleep well, Clara." After Clara was wheeled inside, she looked out the window as Luke rode away toward the fading sunset. She felt something quietly growing inside her: confidence, purpose, and a feeling she couldn't name yet. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I can be more than what others think." Meanwhile, as Luke returned to his ranch, he couldn't stop thinking about Clara's determination. She hadn't just visited. She had contributed. She had changed the energy of the whole ranch in a single day. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't helpless. She was strong. And Luke knew something important. Clara Crowley had a place in his world, a place she had earned with her kindness and quiet courage. And that was only the beginning. Clara's life changed in the weeks that followed her first visit to Luke Merritt's ranch. She felt like she was discovering parts of herself she had almost forgotten: her intelligence, her confidence, her quiet strength, and her ability to bring calm and order into any space she worked in. Every few days, Luke came to pick her up with the wagon. Each time, she waited near the window, filled with excitement. The moment she heard the sound of his horse outside, her heart lifted. Luke always greeted her with a warm smile. And together, they made the journey to the ranch, enjoying soft conversation along the way. At the ranch, Clara became an important part of the daily routine. She kept the books organized, planned schedules, helped Luke think through decisions, and even guided the ranch hands through better ways to track supplies. Everyone respected her because she treated them with kindness and listened carefully to their ideas. But more than the work itself, Clara loved the freedom she felt at the ranch, the fresh air, the open sky, and the simple joy of being included without question. Luke never made her feel limited. Instead, he gave her space to grow, and each day she discovered new abilities she didn't know she had. Word spread quietly throughout Willow Creek. People whispered about how the ranch was running smoother than ever, and how Luke's success was partly thanks to the sheriff's daughter. Some found it surprising, others found it inspiring. But not everyone felt pleased about the change. Sheriff Crowley heard small bits of gossip from shopkeepers and townsfolk. At first, he ignored them. But when he heard people speak proudly of Clara's hard work and her time at the Merritt Ranch, something inside him tightened. It wasn't jealousy, exactly more like discomfort. He wasn't used to others admiring his daughter. He wasn't used to her choosing anything without his approval. He didn't understand why she wanted to spend so much time away from home. He also didn't understand why Luke, a man he had teased in front of others, was now part of his daughter's daily life. The tipping point came one afternoon when a shop owner told him, with a cheerful smile, "Your daughter looked so happy helping Luke today. She's a blessing to that ranch." The sheriff stiffened. "Helping Luke? Again?" "Oh yes," the shop owner replied. "She's been going there quite often. Luke seems to value her greatly." The sheriff nodded politely, but as soon as he left the shop, he felt unsettled. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. He felt out of control, unsure of how things had changed so quickly, without him knowing. That evening, the sheriff arrived home early and asked the housekeeper, "Where is Clara?" "In her room, sir," the housekeeper answered. The sheriff walked upstairs, knocking once before entering. Clara looked up from her desk, surprised, but calm. "Father," she said with a gentle tone, "you're home early." "Yes," he replied, glancing around. Clara closed her notebook, her posture straightening with quiet dignity. "What kind of things?" "That you've been spending a great deal of time at the Merritt Ranch." Clara nodded. "Yes. Luke invited me, and I accepted. I've been helping with the ranch work. It has been good for me." The sheriff took a slow breath, trying to sound firm without raising his voice. "Clara, you belong here at home. A ranch is no place for you. People talk, and I don't like how this makes me look." Clara met his eyes steadily. "This is not about how you look, Father. It's about where I feel useful and included." Her calmness surprised him. He wasn't used to Clara speaking so firmly. "Your place is here," he insisted. "You shouldn't be spending your days running around after ranch work." "I'm not running around," Clara said with a small smile. "I'm doing the work I can do, and I enjoy it." The sheriff fell silent, trying to understand how his daughter had developed such confidence. He felt something unfamiliar, a mixture of confusion and guilt. He opened his mouth to speak again, But Clara continued gently. Father, I know you care for me. I know you worry. But keeping me inside this house doesn't protect me. It only limits me. I want a life beyond these walls. Luke's ranch gives me that. Father. The sheriff swallowed. He wasn't used to hearing such honest words from her. Clara added softly, I'm not a child anymore. He looked away, unable to respond. Clara waited, giving him time. But the sheriff eventually left the room without saying more. She knew the conversation wasn't over. But she had finally spoken her truth. A few days later, when Luke arrived with the wagon, the sheriff stood outside waiting. Luke greeted him politely, unsure what the sheriff wanted. The sheriff cleared his throat. Luke Merritt, he said in a steady voice. I'd like a word with you. Luke nodded, respectful, but cautious. Clara watched from the window, worried but trusting. The sheriff walked slowly toward Luke, his expression unreadable. Luke remained calm, giving him space to speak. I have heard many things, the sheriff began. About my daughter's time on your ranch. About how she's helping you. Luke nodded. She has become an important part of the ranch. I value everything she does. The sheriff shifted slightly. You understand she's my only child. I want the best for her. I understand that, Luke said. And I want the best for her, too. The sheriff studied Luke's face. There was no arrogance, no fear, only sincerity. That honesty made it hard for the sheriff to continue with the protest he planned to give. Finally, he said, I don't want her hurt. I don't want her disappointed. Her world has not been easy. Luke took a gentle breath. She's stronger than you realize. And she deserves a life where she feels valued. I believe she finds that at the ranch. The sheriff fell quiet. Something softened in his eyes. A small crack in the wall he had built over the years. After a long moment, he stepped aside. Take care of her. Luke nodded. I will. Clara, watching from the window, felt tears of relief fill her eyes. Not sadness, but a warm sense of hope. Her father was not perfect, but perhaps he was beginning to understand. Clara's role at the ranch continued to grow. She brought new ideas, encouraged better organization, and helped the ranch hands learn how to keep clear records. Everyone appreciated her gentle guidance. Luke admired her more each day, not just for her intelligence but for her courage and kindness. The ranch felt fuller with her presence. She brought laughter into quiet spaces and calm into busy mornings. She became a partner in Luke's work, not officially, not by title, but by effort and heart. And slowly, something tender began to bloom between them. It wasn't rushed, loud, or dramatic. It was gentle, respectful, and natural. Their conversations grew deeper. Their smiles lingered longer. Their silences became comfortable. One evening, after finishing the day's work, Luke brought Clara to the small hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was painted in shades of peach and gold. It's beautiful, Clara whispered. It always is, Luke said. But it feels different with you here. Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sunset. Luke, I never believed I could have a life like this. A life where I'm part of something meaningful. You've created that life, Luke replied softly. Your strength made it possible. Clara lowered her gaze shyly. Do you really think I'm strong? Luke smiled. I don't just think it, I know it. For a moment, the world felt still, the breeze gentle, the sky glowing, and their hearts quietly understanding each other. When Luke finally asked Clara to marry him, he did so with the same calm sincerity he had always shown. He told her she was not a burden, not a responsibility, but a partner he deeply respected and cared for. Clara accepted, her heart steady and full. The sheriff, despite his prideful nature, eventually gave his blessing, not because he fully understood, but because he saw his daughter's happiness and could no longer deny her the life she had chosen. Their wedding was simple and warm. The townsfolk gathered, offering gentle smiles and good wishes. Clara wore a soft white dress, and Luke never looked prouder. The ranch hands stood tall like family. Even the sheriff stood quietly in the back, his expression softer than anyone had ever seen. After the ceremony, Clara and Luke began a life built on respect, shared dreams, and quiet love. Clara continued her work on the ranch, guiding it with intelligence and dedication. And Luke, always by her side, supported her with unwavering kindness. Together, they proved something important not only to Willow Creek, but to themselves. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it moves in silence. Sometimes it lives in gentle hearts. And sometimes it appears in the one person others overlooked. Clara had once been treated like a fragile shadow in her father's house. But with Luke, she became a guiding light, steady, bright, and full of purpose. And in that peaceful ranch, surrounded by open fields and warm sunsets, Clara finally lived the life she had always deserved.